My husband took a paternity test for our daughter, and the result came back negative, but I have never cheated on him. I don't know how this happened, and I haven't been able to stop crying all day. I have never cheated. I love my husband. We've been together since college, and he's the love of my life. He's handsome and kind, and although I've been with 2 other people, that was before we got together. There's no other possible father for our daughter. We were already married and actively trying to have a baby. I have never cheated, I would never cheat, and I don't know why he took that stupid test, because I would never betray him, but the result came back negative, and now he believes he's not her father. I don't know how to convince him the test is wrong, and I'm terrified. Over the past few months, it feels like he's become a completely different person from the man I married. He's cold and suspicious. He started demanding to see my phone without giving a reason. At first, I showed him, but later I told him I wouldn't unless he explained why. He's also become distant from our daughter. He spends hours locked in his office, and I have no idea what he's doing. I did not cheat. This morning, he accused me, saying he took the test after realizing our daughter's brown eyes couldn't naturally come from both of us having blue eyes. He told me he wanted me to leave the house. I refused, and he locked me out of our bedroom. Now I'm in our daughter's room. This is terrifying. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of our daughter's room, leaning against the wall, watching her sleep as if it were the last time. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He really believes I cheated on him. How could he think that about me? Were all the times he said he loved me, that we were a family, that he trusted me, all lies? Does he truly think I'm capable of such a low betrayal? Me? The person who loves him more than anything? When the sun started to rise, I heard the door to our bedroom open. He walked out without saying a word, didn't even look at me or our daughter. He grabbed his car keys and left. I got up slowly and went to the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen from crying, my face pale. I looked like a ghost. But in that moment, something inside me changed. If he wanted answers, then so did I. If his test says she isn't his daughter, then whose daughter is she? And more importantly, whose child am I, her mother? My mind started to consider absurd possibilities, but none of it made sense. I was there when she was born. I carried her for 9 months. I felt every kick, every movement. I was beside him when he held our daughter for the first time. How could this be possible? I picked up the phone and searched for a DNA testing lab. I called and scheduled a test for me and our daughter. It was something I never imagined doing in my life, but I needed answers just as much as he did. That afternoon, we went to the lab. The staff was polite, but I could feel their curious glances. I was sure they were wondering what could drive a mother to question her bond with her own child. When we got home, he still wasn't there. The silence was unbearable. My daughter, too young to understand, sensed something was wrong and was quieter than usual. I hugged her tightly, as if I needed physical confirmation that she was really mine. The next few days were torture. He barely spoke to me. When he was home, he locked himself in his office, only coming out to eat or use the bathroom. I tried several times to talk to him, to beg him to trust me, but he just looked at me with that empty expression, full of accusations. Finally, the day of the results arrived. I went to the lab alone. He didn't even ask about the test, as if he had already decided the truth didn't matter. I picked up the envelope with trembling hands and got into the car. I couldn't open it. I sat there for a few minutes, taking deep breaths, trying to gather courage. Finally, I opened the envelope and read the results. My eyes scanned the words, but it took time for me to understand what I was reading. Then the truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. The test said I wasn't her biological mother. I read and reread those words, unable to believe it. It couldn't be. It didn't make sense. I carried that child. I was there every step of the way. How could this be wrong? My mind started spiraling, trying to find an explanation. A baby swap at the hospital? A lab error? Something was terribly wrong. But at the same time, a wave of panic and despair began to wash over me. If she isn't my daughter, then whose daughter is she? And where is my real daughter? I went home in a state of shock. He was sitting on the couch, as if he had been waiting for me. When I walked in, he stood up and looked at me, expecting an answer. I tried to speak, but my voice came out shaky and weak. The test says she's not my daughter. He stood still, processing what I had just said. For a brief moment, I saw something different in his eyes, as if he was as lost as I was. But that was quickly replaced by an expression of anger. "So, you admit it?" "Admit what?" I asked, exasperated. "That you lied," he yelled. "She's not even your daughter, so whose is she?" "I don't know," I yelled back, finally letting all my frustration and pain out. "I don't know what's happening, but you think you're hurt?" I'm shattered. She's my daughter. I carried her. I raised her. And now a piece of paper says none of that is real? He stayed silent, and for the first time, I saw something resembling regret in his eyes. But before he could respond, my mind was already elsewhere. We needed answers. We couldn't just accept this. "We're going to the hospital," I said, trying to keep my voice firm. "We're going to find out what happened." He nodded, finally seeming to understand that this was bigger than the two of us. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't lying. But even as we made plans to uncover the truth, a cruel doubt continued to eat away at my heart. What would happen to our family once we finally discovered what had really happened? My life was in shambles, but staying frozen in the chaos wasn't an option. I needed answers. The idea that my daughter could have been switched at birth began to take shape, a terrible yet plausible possibility. However, the hospital was evasive, making it nearly impossible to get any information. With no other choice, I turned to the press. The newspapers picked up my story immediately. It was too shocking to ignore. A mother discovers, after a DNA test, that the daughter she raised for 3 years might not be hers. The response was instant. Reporters were calling constantly for details, and the public pressure on the hospital intensified quickly. After weeks of investigation by journalists and lawyers, a lead finally emerged. Another woman, Clara, had given birth at the same time and in the same hospital as me. The confirmation came when lawyers demanded access to hospital records, and DNA tests were conducted. Clara and I discovered what seemed unimaginable. Our daughters had been switched in the maternity ward. The girl I had raised as my daughter was actually hers, and her daughter, whom I had never met, was biologically mine. The news devastated us. Clara was as heartbroken as I was. She, too, had spent 3 years pouring her love and care into the child she believed was hers. Both families decided to join forces in a massive lawsuit against the hospital. The negligence was undeniable, and the idea that such a grave mistake had gone unnoticed for years only fueled public outrage. The lawsuit was long and exhausting, but we ultimately won. The hospital was ordered to pay millions of dollars in damages to both families. However, no amount of money could undo the emotional and psychological damage caused by their mistake. The sense of victory was overshadowed by the judge's next devastating decision. He ordered that each mother return her biological child. The news hit like a bombshell. I couldn't imagine giving up the girl I had raised as my daughter, who called me mom, who had been the center of my world for 3 years. At the same time, a part of me longed to know my biological daughter. It felt like my heart was being torn in two, and no choice I made could bring me peace. Clara was in an equally impossible position. Supervised meetings began with social workers to help the girls get to know their biological mothers. The first time I saw my biological daughter, I felt a lump in my throat. She was beautiful, with eyes that resembled mine. But she was a stranger to me. At the same time, the thought of being separated from the girl I had called my daughter for 3 years was unbearable. The following weeks were an emotional torment. My husband, who had been cold and distrustful throughout this entire ordeal, started acting as though he wanted to make amends. He tried to comfort me, but I no longer had the strength to pretend everything was okay. Every decision we faced felt wrong. One particularly quiet night, I finally looked at him and said, "I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce." He was stunned, trying to argue, but I wouldn't let him continue. "You destroyed me with your accusations. You chose to blame me before even considering that I was suffering as much as you were. And now that we finally have the truth, do you think a simple "I'm sorry" is going to fix everything? I can't. He apologized, begged for a second chance, but I knew the love and trust we once had were gone. The legal process wasn't over yet, and the judge's final decision required us to return our biological daughters. But how could we do that? Both families were stuck in a painful dilemma, unable to imagine a swap that felt as unnatural as it was necessary. The months that followed were filled with tense meetings, heated discussions, and constant uncertainty. The legal battle was over, but the emotional struggle was just beginning. Even with the truth out in the open, the scar of this horrendous mistake would mark our lives forever. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I also knew I had to keep moving forward for myself and for the children. Now, faced with the decision to swap our daughters, the dilemma was clear. What truly defines a mother? Blood or bond? No answer felt right, and the future had never been more uncertain. The day had arrived. The court-mandated exchange, a moment that felt more like a nightmare than reality, was about to take place. The case had already gained international attention, with documentaries online and media outlets from around the world covering every detail. When we parked at the designated location, flashes from cameras and microphones immediately surrounded us. Reporters shouted questions, cameramen adjusted their angles, and I felt suffocated by the weight of the expectations. As I entered the courthouse, I saw Clara on the other side of the room, holding the hand of the girl who was biologically mine. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the same panic that was consuming me. Both of us were on the verge of tears, clutching the hands of our daughters, trying to prepare ourselves for something no mother could ever truly be ready for. The officials began organizing the exchange. Everything was meticulously planned, as though our lives were nothing more than a legal transaction. A social worker approached to guide us to the center of the room. The moment had come. Clara and I hesitated, our eyes meeting again, and tears began to flow. Neither of us could move. The girls, innocent in all of this, held our hands tightly. My daughter, or rather, the daughter I had raised, looked up at me with eyes that pleaded, "Mommy, what's happening?" How could I explain? How could I let go? There was an awkward moment of silence, broken only by murmurs from the crowd and the clicking of cameras. Then, something unimaginable happened. The husbands intervened. My ex-husband, still resentful of me but seemingly determined to follow the court's orders, took the child I had raised and, with a firm gesture, walked over to Clara. Her husband, without hesitation, did the same. It was devastating. Watching my daughter being taken from my arms while another girl, biologically mine, was placed in front of me felt like having my heart ripped out. The room fell silent. The girls began crying, calling out for us, their mothers. My body was frozen, but my mind raced. Desperation overtook me, and as if driven by an uncontrollable instinct, I turned to Clara. This can't be the end. We can't let them decide this for us. Clara, also in tears, nodded, understanding what I was suggesting. Let's undo this exchange, I said, my voice trembling but filled with determination. A mother's love is stronger than any court order. The press, which had been silently filming every moment, began to murmur loudly. Reporters adjusted their microphones, their attention fixed on what was unfolding. I looked at Clara and continued, my voice now steadier. Not only will we undo the exchange, but we will raise these girls together. They will grow up knowing they have two mothers and two families who love them. Clara took my hand and looked into my eyes, finally managing a smile through her tears. Yes. They don't have to choose. They can have both. Without waiting for anyone's approval, we stood up. I took the child I had raised back into my arms, while Clara did the same with the daughter she had raised. The tears of sorrow turned into tears of relief, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were doing the right thing. The husbands tried to argue, but it didn't matter anymore. Clara and I were resolute. The love we felt for these girls was greater than any court ruling, greater than any societal expectations. The reporters captured every moment, and before we knew it, The courtroom was in chaos. We went home together, with both girls by our sides. Sitting down, we discussed how this new dynamic would work. We decided the girls would have 2 homes, 2 mothers, and constant access to one another. Clara and I promised never to let anyone separate them again. The documentaries and news reports gained new chapters. People around the world watched as we, 2 women divided by a terrible mistake, turned a tragedy into an act of love and unity. And so, a new chapter began. The girls, despite their young age, seemed to understand that something bigger had happened. They laughed and played together, as if they knew they now had something more, a sister by heart, someone who would always be by their side. What had seemed like the most painful ending became a new beginning, and Clara and I moved forward, confident that we had made the right choice. After all, a mother's love transcends any court decision, and together, we created something stronger than any ruling, a family.